Well, the federal government's latest stance on Israel's war with Hamas, Hezbollah and now Iran has put Australia at odds with its number one ally, the United States, as well as with Israel, the United Kingdom and Canada. It seems as if Labor is redrawing Australia's military and diplomatic position in the world. And as I mentioned earlier, does taking such a solo stance no longer guarantee reciprocal support from those countries if or when Australia is faced with aggression from, say, China or whoever in the Indo-Pacific? Let's bring in Queensland One Nation Senator Malcolm Roberts on that and more. Senator, welcome back to ADH TV.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be back. Thanks for the invitation.
Israel's most recent attacks on Hezbollah were aimed at preventing a repeat of the October 7 massacre. Is Peter Dutton right to say the Prime Minister should be condemned for falling out with our allies?
This is a big escalation on Israel's part. It's almost all-out war, but it's something that I think that Israel has a right to defend itself. The history of this area, this region of the world, is rife with lies, complexities, contradictions, and you know, the first casualty in war is the truth. So we'll never know, but Israel has a right to defend itself, but we must keep Australia out of it. We must keep Australia out of it. We followed the Americans into just about everything without question. They're an important ally of ours, but we must hold them accountable as well.
Do you sense that Anthony Albanese is trying to appease voters in those Muslim-concentrated seats in southwestern Sydney?
Yes, without a doubt. Anthony Albanese has shown a distinct lack of respect for Australia's position in his deliberations. What he wants to do is promote the Labor Party. The national interest is not in Anthony Albanese's calculations.
There are some good signs among crossbenchers, Malcolm, that Labor's misinformation and disinformation bill will struggle. That's a sign of good news?
It's a very good sign of good news. We put a motion out, matter of urgency, last Monday of the sitting in the Senate, and there were quite a few signals coming across to us that people wouldn't support it. So that's why we did that matter of urgency, had forced a vote on it. But let's remember, it's not Labor's misinformation, disinformation bill. The Morrison Liberal Nationals, with Morrison Littleproud in charge, introduced it into the Parliament. Labor brought it back and is now putting it into the voting regime process. And now the Liberals are saying they will come up with their own before the next election. The Liberals just don't get it. No one wants this bloody censorship bill. And One Nation makes a promise it will never introduce such a bill. The best defence of truth is to let debate happen. The largest, and then we've got the largest perpetrators of misinformation and disinformation is the government. And this Albanese government takes the cake. It's all about control and censorship, and they haven't got the guts to do it themselves. They're trying to intimidate the search engines and platforms into doing it for them and putting them in a position where, as someone said recently, they'll be fined if they don't exercise enough control, enough censorship, but they will not be fined if they exercise excess censorship. This is just about getting government control over the debate in this country and suppressing free speech. That's all it is. One Nation will never, ever introduce such a bill.
I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, if an opposition or a government wants to do anything about what we say freely, I think they should wind back the restrictions that exist right now because the e-safety czar is out of control.
I agree with you, and this compounds the problem. As I said, the best defence of truth is to let open, free debate continue. That's the best way of finding out the truth. And you can never take responsibility for someone's opinions. That's their responsibility. They formed it. This will just make more victims in society, and it'll suppress free speech. It's just a road to tyranny. That's all it is.
OK, another subject. Labor has delayed the public release of its COVID-19 review. What is the government afraid of to show, do you think?
Review. You'd hardly call it a review, Chris. I think you're being very, very kind there. Look, the panellists were biased. They were lockdown supporters. They're not allowed to look at the state responses. They've got no investigative powers. They've got no power to compel evidence, compel documents, compel witnesses. This is just a sham. It is to get at Morrison, and Morrison should be got at. He deserves to be really hammered on this, but he's no more guilty he's just as guilty, rather, as the state premiers, who are mostly Labor. This is a protection racket for the Labor premiers and the Labor bureaucrats. We need a Royal Commission now, and a Royal Commission now.
You see, I would have thought the Royal Commission needs to look at two things that so-called review is not even touching: the states, as you mentioned, and their role when it came to lockdowns and all kinds of freebies that were handed out to the public. But also on top of that, the deals that were done with Big Pharma over those damn vaccines that have proved to be a con themselves.
I agree with you entirely. In fact, there are many, many areas that need to be looked at, Chris. I moved a motion to get one of the committees in the Senate to investigate and develop a draft terms of reference for a possible Royal Commission, and that was passed through the Senate. That the committee did it, and I want to commend former barrister Julian Gillespie, for he pulled an enormous team together and developed a phenomenal submission, 180 pages, I think it was. 46,000 signatures. It was the people's submission, and it turned it into a de facto inquiry into COVID, and it covers everything. And the chair, Paul Scarr, I must say, of the committee, did a phenomenal job, along with the Secretariat, of pulling that into something that's very, very workable. There are draft terms of reference ready to go, and they're completely comprehensive, cover every topic imaginable.
Let's get on to energy now. A report from the US Energy Department is saying that with nuclear, electricity prices will drop 37%. Chris Bowen says renewables will always be cheaper. This is basically a blatant lie, isn't it, Malcolm?
Well, you stole the word right out of my mouth. It is a lie. It is fraud. Fraud is the presentation of something as it is not for personal gain. Chris Bowen has been pushing this bandwagon, the lies, fraudulently to get political capital. He is telling lie after lie. Solar and wind are the most expensive forms of energy. That's repeated everywhere. You know, AEMO doesn't even cost the lowest price system. What they did with relying on GenCost in the first place was that GenCost gave false assumptions underpinning their calculations for solar and wind to make them look favourable,
yep,
and negative assumptions under coal to make it look unaffordable. That is completely false. And now we've got a circular argument that's beaten back to us all the time. Now, AEMO doesn't cost the lowest price systems. It's forced to exclude the cost of calculating coal or nuclear.
The CSIRO should
rubbish.
be condemned.
It's stuff that comes out of the south end of a northbound bull.
Yeah, well, the CSIRO should be condemned completely for their reliance on that GenCost report, Malcolm.
That is fraud as well, Chris. It was a deliberate misrepresentation of the energy structure. It was politically driven to achieve a political objective, the same as their climate. The CSIRO has admitted to me that the politicians quoting them as saying that there's a danger in carbon dioxide from human activity. The CSIRO has denied ever saying that, and they said they would never say it. They admitted to me that the temperatures today are not unusual, not unprecedented. So the whole thing is based on the stuff that comes out of the south end of a northbound bull. The CSIRO is guilty of misrepresenting climate science, misrepresenting nature, misrepresenting climate, misrepresenting energy. It's just a fraud to extract money, to make billionaires richer, and to make foreign multinationals richer.
Spot on.
And we pay for it.
Spot on. You're not wrong. I think it's fair to say too, Malcolm, that Australia's immigration program is now officially out of control, and the worst it has ever been.
Without a doubt, completely agree with you. We have more than 2.4 million residents, excluding tourists, million residents who are not citizens, excluding tourists. Rent is up 52% in 5 years. Now, just remember that the Albanese promised, after the last financial year where we got 518,000 net immigrants, by far the largest ever, almost double the previous record. Albanese came out and said, yeah, we'll cut it. Well, the rate its immigration is coming in this year is higher than the record from last year. Yep. Higher. These people are just telling lies after lies, and the thing is, they're hiding over a per person, a per capita recession. That's what they don't want to be the government that was in place when the recession occurred. They would rather see people sleeping under bridges, in tents, in cars. I mean, working families, Chris, are going home at night to their kids and sleeping in cars. Where do they shower? Where do they toilet? I mean, we've got the richest state in the world potentially in Queensland, and we've got people living under bridges, families, working families. And because the government, it just wants to look good by lifting up to make sure we don't have a recession. We would be in a recession now without large-scale immigration fudging the numbers.
Fudging the numbers, that's exactly what large-scale immigration does. It's terrific to have you on the program. Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you for your time.
You're welcome, Chris, anytime.
All right, Queensland Senator Malcolm Roberts.